Welcome to the Globetrottin ADs. This podcast is for you, athletic directors, activity coordinators, coaches, and program associates based in international schools around the world. The Globetrottin ADs is proudly hosted by Nick DeForest from the American International School, Vienna, and Matt Fleming from the American International School of Budapest. Here they are now, Nick and Matt, and the Globetrottin ADs.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Globetrottin ADs. So we're getting back to relevant topics that are taking place throughout our community of international school athletic directors. We've had a great run with the last few episodes talking about master's degree programs and some higher education stuff, which has been great. But today we're getting back to our boots on the ground kind of stuff. So it's going to be very good. We're going to talk about weathering the pandemic in China. We have some guests today that are coming from international schools in China. So we want to welcome Thomas Mathews, who's the Director of Athletics and Activities at Shekou International School in Shenzhen, and also to Turner Neal, who's the Director of Athletics at Concordia International School in Shanghai. So we'll get going with those guys and find out some interesting and exciting developments that are happening over there. Before we do that, though, I'm going to check in with Nick over in Vienna. How you doing, Nick?
Hey, good. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, you're right. This has been last two have been really exciting episodes and interesting in one way, and this one will be a total other direction. But I'm really interested in hearing from Turner and Thomas because I think a lot of us in Europe have been living, the high life really back to normal for a while, but that hasn't been the case everywhere. And then, of course, through the pandemic, situations all over have been very different. So thanks, guys, for wanting to be on and talking about it. And I'm really excited. So, but before we dig into that, why don't we just meet you a little bit for people that don't know who you are? Thomas, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe how long you've been there, some little things like that.
Sure, yeah. Thomas Mathews, it's my third year at the school. SIS is 35 years old. Shenzhen's only 45 years old, and in a country of China with a lot of history. And
Wow.
so the school's kind of grown with the city, and so because of that, we've got some cool influence on the city and our community here in Shekou, and it's a fun, vibrant community to be involved in. A lot of international families that live here, even have weathered through the pandemic, so that's been fun. But this is my seventh year in China, so I knew China before the pandemic, and then just was blessed to move here in 2020, right as it all kind of kicked off. So
Yeah, that's good. Some before and afters for sure. Thanks. Well, thanks for being on here. First time for you, not the first time for Turner. Turner, please remind our listeners a little bit.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Turner Neal, and this is my fifth year at Concordia International School, Shanghai, and 11th as an AD. I was an AD in Minnesota in the United States before coming overseas. This is my first international school. And so I've been in China since then with my wife. I'm currently the chair of SciSac, which is the Shanghai International School Activities Conference, as well as APAC, the Asia Pacific Activities Conference.
Great. And two, I think, well, we'll find out, but some different views of depending on what cities you're in and what your schools have been like, right? So
I was just going to say we've also got a SciSac down here in Shenzhen as well, Turner.
There's only so many names that can go around, man. So many acronyms.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, and varying, like one letter different.
If we do any more, I'll probably just butcher them anyways. I already butchered. He told me right before we got on how to pronounce it. And of course, I did do it right.
China names are hard, my friend. It's okay.
Yeah. So how's it going there? What's been going on, and what are the main differences of being in China during the pandemic than I guess where we are in Europe or some other Western places?
Yeah, so it's been quite different. We've, especially I think in Shanghai, We experienced a almost 60-day lockdown last spring, in which folks were really not allowed to leave their housing complexes. There was mandatory testing every day. There was a good window for about 30 days in which people could really not leave their apartments. We were receiving government rations of vegetables that we have never heard of, and forced to cook our own food, which is a rare thing, I think, for foreigners in China, if you know how we live at all. So it's been very challenging for the last 3 years. We've really not had or had the ability to travel or participate in competitions outside of the city. How China approached COVID is they tried to keep everyone locked down, especially within education. And so teachers and students were really not allowed in Shanghai to leave the city limits of Shanghai. They used a variety of tech to make that happen. And it's quite crazy to explain this to people who haven't been here. And so on our phones, everyone's got GPS. And when you travel outside of the city, you have a travel arrow that shows where and what cities you have been in the last 14 days. If you have been somewhere that had a registered case of COVID, you would get a red code, and you may be taken away to a large quarantine center at like a stadium, where you might be given a 3 meter by 3 meter bed and single plug outlet. And so that's what we were kind of living under for 3 years. That being said, there were very few cases. And so because of that, life continued somewhat normally, actually, as normal as we could in that setting. One of the things I found during COVID is that we adjust to life very quickly, and your brain has an interesting way of adjusting to these things. And you can understand how authoritarian slide can happen very quickly. More recently, we had the government here, I think, recognized in December that cases were getting out of control. And so we went in Shanghai from testing every single day at school, and we needed a 24-hour code that showed that we had been tested in the most recent 24 hours. We had to do that every day. And we were wearing masks at school, to about 80% of the population here getting COVID in 2 weeks. And they just pulled the Band-Aid off. And we had about a month where things were a little bit scary, because a lot of people here are not vaccinated, or have had the Chinese vaccine, which I think is a little bit less effective than a lot of foreign vaccines. And now we're almost back to normal. And so we can travel out of country again for the first time. Tomorrow, I've got schools coming down from Beijing for the first time in 3.5 years to compete in sport. And so it's been quite crazy how quickly things have changed in the last 2 months or so.
That's pretty crazy. All in once there, all those different things to do, like the roller coaster. Thomas, what, thinking back to those early stages at your new school, right? Also, what was the main difference for you in your town, if it's different than Shanghai, before and after the pandemic started?
Yeah, I started in Shekou in 2020, right? And so my first 3.5 months were online, working from our home in Texas. My wife and I, doing all-nighters, and just kind of holding toothpicks in our eyes to stay open at night. And so that was obviously a challenge, and that's how we started at the school. And so I got to read a lot of handbooks, and really dig deep into policy and learn everything about what I was getting myself into, which in a lot of ways was great. And also gave me a chance to just kind of see who the main players were here on campus in terms of staff and coaches and folks who could help support the little programs that we still had running. But I would say, honestly, through the pandemic, I guess it almost got progressively worse in a way of clamping down. And in a lot of ways, those clampdowns were good, because they were keeping the number of cases relatively close to zero, and giving us a chance to feel healthy and safe and whatever. And so, yeah, masks were never necessarily a big mandate in Shenzhen. All through, they were early on in the pandemic, but after I got here, it was just government buildings, public transportation, and malls essentially that you had to wear masks in. Not really in schools too much, and definitely not out in public. But in 2022, it got a little tighter, right? Where I think my wife and I added up, we did almost 3 months of quarantine or lockdown in last calendar year, right? And so that was because we chose to travel to the States. We had a child in 2021, and so we obviously wanted to take him back and let him meet his grandparents. And so part of the 3 months of quarantine was us, seeing family. But the other part of that was, being a close contact to somebody when we decided to travel out of our city and getting locked down and then getting thrown in quarantine and stuff. And so, it was tough because you never kind of knew where to turn or what to do. And even when we were in the States, we were so scared to get COVID that, we weren't sure when to see family and how to see family and where to go, or do we meet outside, or how close do we get, or do we hug you, or what? It was all really stressful to a degree. But
wow. Hey, you mentioned the quarantine, and Turner talked about getting taken to a center maybe with a 3x3 bed, or was that in your town too, Thomas? Did you have to experience something like that?
Not in Shenzhen. So Shenzhen approached it a little bit differently. We did daily testing, where I think Shanghai didn't really institute that until the cases kind of, I don't know, got out of control. Maybe I don't know if that's the way to put it or not. But almost from the start of 2022, we were doing daily testing, and so that was actually built into our school schedule. It was done on campus. We, paid the testers to come in, and they knocked it out in 10 or 15 minutes. They went through all 1,200 of our kids and 250 staff, and we went on with our days. So.
Wow, so different, like some of the things, like not masks were huge here, right? But obviously other things were more relaxed. And you mentioned as it ramped up this year, 2022, that's when things were easier here. And I'm sure you saw people like me and Matt making posts of tournaments and travel and things. So what did it feel like, being stuck in China, I guess, when everyone else was really back to normal?
It was challenging, I think. We have a lot of close relationships with the IASIS schools, and so we're very connected with them. We used to do APAC versus IASIS championships, and then we've split in APAC. We have a mainland China division and a non-mainland China division. And so some of our friends and colleagues at like Seoul Foreign School or Taejon Christian, Canadian Academy in Kobe, Japan, they've been able to travel and participate in a lot more events than what we have. And we've seen that on social media. That's certainly a challenge for us, but there's give and take. I think Thomas really hit it on the head, where like we didn't mask in school until December. This past December was the first time that we were really masking in school. I think one of the reasons for that is early on in maybe March or April of 2020, when COVID wasn't on the radar of other schools, masking was really big here. And there were a couple incidents where I think at public schools, some Chinese students wearing masks had like died in PE class. And so because of that, there was this idea that students they should be involved in sports and activities to stay fit. And if you're wearing a mask, it is dangerous, and so you shouldn't do that. I think that the goal was to keep COVID out of the schools so that we could be as normal as possible. I mean, before we had masks on, we would be online, frankly, and be in distance learning for a variety of reasons. And so they've just approached it very differently here than in the rest of the world. And so there's definitely like give and take to that. I've had COVID myself, one time for sure, but I was in the United States, and one time probably here where I avoided getting tested and stayed in my house and took a yellow code, which meant I hadn't tested in 5 days. So that I would not test positive here and get locked up, because the fear of getting locked up was much greater than the fear of having COVID. But for example, my wife has never had COVID. And I think that's a pretty rare thing in today's world. My assistant has never had COVID. My assistant has never been vaccinated and never had COVID.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a very different place and yeah, place and time here in China when it comes to COVID.
The other side of being stuck in China, right, is that we were still able to do domestic travel, and this is a massive country with a lot of beautiful things going on, and
Cool.
great places to see. And I heard one time, and I don't know if it's true or not, but that 95% of China, and this was years ago, but 95% of China is not really accessible to foreigners because they just haven't translated things for us yet. And so we got around quite a bit. We when I traveled in the States before, I was staying in Holiday Inns and Sheratons, right? And we were staying in Shangri-Las and Intercontinentals and the Mandarin Oriental, and so that was a big change too, because you definitely changed the way that you live, and so that was fun. And now I'm dealing with the repercussions of that as I try to travel again. The prices have changed, and of course the wife still wants to stay at the Mandarin Oriental and the Intercon. So
yeah, like a Holiday Inn in the States might cost you the same as one of those places, right? Like a normal. Crazy.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And so when we had breaks, there would be times when you didn't need that 14 days. So in Shanghai, it was pretty consistent that you needed 14 days and then 7 days later on to go to school. But we spent summers here. We spent 3-week winter break holidays here, which enabled us to travel all over China. And so I think like you said, it's challenging to get around. My wife and I have taken Mandarin courses a couple times a week since we came. And so we speak, moderate Mandarin, I would say. And now we've been to probably 11 or 12 of the provinces here in China. And we took like one trip in one summer in which we rode yaks, we rode camels through the desert, we rode elephants in the jungle, and we rode horses in Inner Mongolia. And we could do that all in one summer. Like that's 45 days of travel around China. You have to remember that China is about the same size as the United States, but we tend to forget that Alaska is a big part of that, and China includes Alaska when it comes to that, that size. And so it's a huge country with a lot of different cool places to see. And so we've been able to explore that. And that's been one of the silver linings, I think, out of this is we've seen all these incredible places in China that we would have never seen had we not been locked down. We would have been in Thailand or the Philippines or the United States instead.
Cool.
With that in mind, we've moved forward. You guys are starting to move forward and things are changing. And you were saying also, Turner, that coming up now, you're going to be getting back into tournaments. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. So now that things are opening up a little more, what does this school year look like going forward to the end of it? And then what about plans going forward for next year?
Yeah, I think the second semester of this school year is going to be interesting, right? Because we're a member of ACMIS as Concordia is as well, in two different capacities, right? And so we're in a division where we play core sports in ACMIS, and so we're very much looking forward to going to Tianjin and going to our Orange Division tournament, which is something that we haven't been able to do since the pandemic, right? And so for kind of reference points, Shenzhen is in the south of China. Tianjin is up by Beijing, and so that's a big trip. Even though it's domestic, it's going to be a good trip for us as a school to get back to that, and then we'll host ACMAS badminton, and it's looking like we'll probably host about 20 schools here, and so that'll be a huge event to bring in close to 200 kids to play that, and so that's exciting for the second part of this year. And then looking at next year, it's just exciting to think about getting back to sending kids across the world for AMI or for MUN or for the different events that they've missed out on, and we've kind of had to try to replicate online. And they've done a fantastic job of that, but the reality is that like we appreciate, right, those face-to-face interactions are so much more beneficial than sitting in front of a computer screen.
Great. And how's that look for, you mentioned a few borders. Are you able to cross borders now?
Yeah, so I actually look out at Hong Kong from my balcony at home, and if you get on the roof of our school, you can see it as well. And so I'm headed to Hong Kong on Friday. It's going to be my third time, I guess, and we're actually sending our first school group across to Hong Kong next weekend for just a day trip to go see a play. And so we're back.
That's cool. And Turner, you're back in big fashion. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we've got APAC coming up this week for season 2 sports. We've got APAC next week for season 2 fine arts. Those are all within mainland China still right now, because that's how we have our divisions set up. We split from mainland and non-mainland 3 years ago and have kept those divisions since then. We are still looking at potentially getting over. We've got a relationship with Taipei American School, and so we do a lot of different things with them, and they've invited us to participate in a pretty big international track meet that they have every year in March. And so we're still kind of looking at that and deciding if we might be able to get there and make it down to Hong Kong to compete against HKIS sometime this spring as well. What we're looking at now is we have the go-ahead effectively to look at trips, not the go-ahead to go on every one, but to at least look at trips where we do not need to test and quarantine on arrival. And so right now there's still some political issues between China and Korea, China and Japan, where we have other partner schools. And so because we would need to test and potentially kids would be put in like mandatory 7-day quarantines when we arrive, we would not do that. But we're hopeful that will return next year. This coming May, we'll have our first APAC AD conference down in Bangkok with all 12 ADs getting together for the first time since October 2019. And at that event, we'll be talking about next year. And so we're not sure if we'll go to full international divisions for next year. How APAC works is we have divisional sports, which are required by APAC, and they're 6 and 6, and then we have conference level sports. So think about swimming, cross country, track and field, where we can have 10, 11 schools all get together. And so right now we're still trying to decide if we'll go full international, or perhaps we keep the divisions as mainland China and non-mainland China. And then we have 1 year of transition where we do international conference level sports against each other again, with the goal of returning to full normalcy in 24, 25.
Complicated, right? I mean, because even this, you're fine on your side. You mentioned, if to go to a certain country, they're not fine with you coming over or have certain stipulations, right? So.
And there's a certain amount of reciprocity that goes with it too. And so at the moment, China's not issuing visas to those folks, so they can't get in. And so it just so happens that within mainland China, we've got some of the bigger schools. And so like we're the only ones that can host a softball tournament. So there's 3 schools outside of mainland China who would love to get in April to participate in the APAC softball tournament. Within APAC, you need to have 4 schools as a minimum to call it an APAC. So they can't do it without us, actually. And so if visas were to open up, and we understand that that may happen in the next couple of weeks, we could have some, like Brent International School, Manila might be coming in. Canadian Academy from Kobe might be coming in. China is not testing and not quarantining people on arrival. They need to test before they jump on the plane, which I think everyone is very fine with. And so perhaps we have some international schools coming in to China this coming spring, and then we're really hopeful that we'll be able to get out pretty quick here.
So it sounds like a lot of things are going to be happening very fast, right? So, it's going to be a matter of staying on top of these things and your logistics and deadlines. It's kind of like what happened to us last year, because we in Budapest we got the okay to start traveling out of country again. I would say about beginning to mid-April. So we had opportunities we could join, but it all happened pretty quick. And luckily it worked out. It really did. Like, we were able to get to places, but it was all ground transport. So we didn't fly anywhere just yet. This past fall we were able to, but it's going to be very exciting, but very busy for you guys. So good luck with all of that.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. We're super excited. I mean, for this APAC that's coming up tomorrow, we put it together in about 3 weeks. Because that's how quickly the borders changed. And the ADs got together and said, could we pull this off? And so it's been a lot of work for us here in Shanghai as we prepare for the Beijing schools, just to be able to put on, a 50, 60 kid table tennis tournament with 1,000 different matches. It was quite a feat. And so we're excited for that. And we're excited to return to normalcy, where one has, 2-3 months to plan for big competition.
Yeah, Turner, I think you're exactly right. If this has allowed us to learn anything, it's that you can throw something together in a few days and it's still a really good event, right? Where I think we're all used to having everything planned, and turned in and roster set and everything at least a month in advance. And that hasn't been for the last 3 years here, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you'll get some grace with that, right? With folks just happy to go, and everybody knows you're going to do the best you can. And if there's little quirks that happen along the way, I'm sure it'll be fine.
You really hit the nail on the head there. And it's one of the things that I'm the most excited about. And again, it's a silver lining here, which is that I think the attitude around sport has changed a lot here. It was a hype, APAC, if you guys know, was very competitive. We have an entire sportsmanship handbook for table tennis, and there's 2 pages about taunting and what you can and cannot do in terms of taunting, because that was a serious issue. As we're approaching these APACs, people are they have so much gratitude to be back involved with sport that, if somebody says, hey, this person bailed, can I change my roster? In the past, that was an automatic no. Rosters are set. Of course you can't. What can we do to help? What do we need to do? You've got 2 less kids in your table tennis team. I can probably pull 2 kids from my team, and I won't give you my worst kids, and we'll throw them on your team so that you guys have a fighting chance to go and get this. I mean, that attitude has been pervasive across all of Shanghai, and I think across APAC, where people are just so excited to be there, that it's not going to be, we'll be excited if we win, but it's so much more about celebrating, the benefits of sport and being together. And I'm really hopeful, and I've talked with both of my conferences this week about, I hope that we can keep that attitude alive for the next couple of years, and that we can make a real change in how we approach sport here, because it should be about celebrating, being together, and all those things, and it doesn't always have to be about winning.
This is great. I wasn't quite sure, looking from Europe to China, it seemed like the worst place in the world to be the last few years. And you guys are smiling, you're telling, some silver lining stories, some great things, and now some positive benefits coming out of it. So that's really great to hear that is the case. It's not as bad as it seems, because you just hear, we hear the negatives are, oh, big bad China's doing this and doing that, and and not all these other things. So it seems like the experience has taught you and your schools and maybe all your community something really good.
Yeah, Nick, I had this really weird feeling on January 8th when the borders were open. I was like, these foreigners can't come in. This is my country, this is my place. But no, it's obviously the right step, and it's much needed and welcomed. But it was just a funny like, oh
Yeah.
no, this is mine.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I was gonna say, I'm really happy for you guys that you can have in-person AD meetings again, because that's a
Oh,
huge.
it's huge, huge.
Oh man, an AD conference
Together
back
like
on the venue next December, gentlemen.
I don't know. I've seen Matt too many times in person this year. I want to go. No, I'm just kidding. Kidding. Well, what is next? I mean, just for you guys personally, are you've weathered the storm? Are you in China for the long haul now? Are you using this opportunity to get out? What's next for you two?
Yeah, I strongly considered getting out, and I just think that recruitment fell at a really tough time this year in terms of when policies were announced, because literally the day we were set to make a decision, the following day was when China started to make their kind of progressive string of announcements towards opening, and so a lot of our staff had to make a decision to leave, knowing that they wanted to stay at the school, but that they just couldn't deal with the policies anymore. And my wife and I luckily decided to stay, and we're really happy we made that decision. And so, yeah, I'm actually booked to go down to Thailand to Phase and Phuket.
Oh, nice.
And,
Yeah.
that'll be kind of my first travel out, and not that it's necessarily a only AD conference. It'll be a nice gathering with folks of similar minds, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm excited about that as well.
That's cool. That's cool. What about you, Turner?
We had a similar challenging decision actually, and so my wife and my wife has not been out of China in 3 years. I did go back to the United States to do quarantine. She did quarantine coming back in. I would say she didn't want to do it, and so she stayed in China when I had gone back. And so we decided in August to resign from Concordia. And so we are not returning to Concordia. Concordia it's a great place. I love Concordia. They had been recruiting us heavily to change our minds. And it just so happened that they made an offer to another AD who's in China, and he's a new great friend of mine, on the same day that China relaxed its quarantine policies. So that morning, they made an offer to somebody else. And that afternoon, China changed their policies. And I was talking to my good friends at SAS that night about how timing in life is so very interesting, and how Hannah and I had said we would be willing to stay in China. We love China actually, and have spent time learning Chinese, and we would have been willing to stay had we known that 24 hours earlier. And my friend at SAS Puxi said, Turner, we're going to make a job for you. And so I'm actually going to be moving over to SAS Puxi, staying in Shanghai, staying in Saisak, and staying in APAC. So I'll be in the city, moving over to the big arch rival next year.
That's cool.
And running the frenemy across the city next year.
Wow, interesting timing
Nice,
for
good for
both
you.
of you guys. Yeah. Wow.
That's great. All right.
Very unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, another silver lining, like we talked, this is great to hear these stories from you guys, and it's very upbeat and positive going forward. I think we all knew the light was at the end of the tunnel at some point. I think little sooner than other places, of course, throughout the international world. But just really happy for you guys that it's finally coming around. You're starting to organize things for your communities and for the kids, and we just wish you all the best for these events coming up and whatever will happen next. And I know they're going to be great. They're going to be a lot of fun, and good to see the traditions coming back. So congratulations and all the best for it.
Really appreciate the opportunity to be on here with you guys tonight. And as always, I just want to say thank you for what you guys do for international ADs and bringing the spotlight to the hard work we do and the difference that we make in the lives of kids. So thank you guys very much for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll piggyback off that. I feel kind of like I know Nick. We've never met each other in person, but just from
Right.
reading the book and listening to the podcast and seeing you through NIAAA and all the different things,
Right.
it'll be nice to actually shake your hand someday.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking about coming to Phase. I couldn't make it in my schedule, but maybe sometime soon. Thanks,
Yeah.
Thomas and Turner. Appreciate it.
Kukri are a global multi-sport clothing brand specializing in providing the world's most prestigious schools with bespoke made and designed team uniforms for students of all standards and abilities. If you are frustrated by inconsistent colors, branding, costs, and sizing across your school's uniforms, then it's time to discuss an offering where every sport is available from softball to soccer for male and female athletes at rates to suit your budget. To find out how Kukri could elevate the apparel of your student athletes to a professional level, email the team at contact@kukrisports.com. A dedicated sales manager will offer you a quote today. Mention this ad and receive a special offer on your coach or PE staff order.
Until next week, this has been another episode of the Globetrottin ADs.